Right. Hello, everyone. Happy weekend. Hopefully, I'm sounding okay and I didn't just blast you guys with the audio. But I hope you guys are having a terrific Sunday. I sure am. It's been a pretty good weekend of different things, and I'm always excited to be with you guys. So hopefully, the audio is coming in clear. Once I have the audio in the clear, I'll turn on the video. It's just my normal computer today, so it'll be that old camera. Oh, I just remembered. I didn't set up my computer where I'd be closer to the camera. Oh, well. Okay, audio sounds great, says my wonderful prof and channel member. Thank you, my prof. That music, yes, let's go ahead and welcome the chat and we'll see. But I do see a lot of people. Ace is in the house. Thank you for coming. You like the new avatar? It's actually somewhat of an older avatar. I use this avatar for science fiction because it's even the background. Maybe you could see like the building behind her head. It's got a nice sci-fi aesthetic. So I use it for my sci-fi commentary. I also use that concentration ambient track for my sci-fi commentary, which I made about 10 months ago for your concentration or creativity. I'm gonna go ahead and set that banner or pull that banner down. Should be good. And yeah, let me take a swig of water. And we'll welcome the chat. Let's see how the camera looks. Okay, good. Everything looks fine. So yeah, it's the older camera. It's just it's easier to maintain. I will probably still use Professor Geek's computer from time to time. In fact, I was going to use his computer because I had an article to read on this stream, but I decided no, there's not going to be an article on this stream. This is going to be a total rant. I think I have something on my shirt. Okay, that's going to bother me. One second, I have to wipe it off. All right. We'll see how that looks. It's hopefully the camera won't catch it. Yeah. Oh, now it's a wet spot. Oh man. Oh well. I might have to change shirts, guys. That's gonna bother me too. One second. Okay, I'm back for real. We went from purple to black. I was hoping to wear purple. I like purple. I feel like purple. Actually, my covers. I'm going to show you a couple books. They're both purple. So, and I like the color purple. Oh well, I do have OCD. My prof says. And if there's a spot or something on her shirt, it will distract her while she's trying to talk. Everything distracts me while I'm trying to talk. I try to look directly at the camera so I'm not seeing the video at all. So let us see. Let us see the chat. So we've got Ace, we've got Final Fantasy. Thank you for coming. You've got you say about the music, you can't help but get some vibes off of the Halo game with the song. Maybe it's just the hymns. I'm not sure of the Halo soundtrack, but thank you. I mean, I've heard some of the Halo soundtrack, but as far as the hymns or what the context is, I don't know. But thanks for that. I hope that's a good thing. All right. Then we've got Brian. Thank you for coming. You say, so what's wrong? Where writers go wrong with stories? Where do I begin? Yeah, we're going to talk about a story in particular. We're going to talk about a story in particular, and it's on the thumbnail. So, and I have it right here. It's this book here. And yeah, it's a Prelude to Foundation, the first story chronologically speaking for the Foundation series, by Isaac Asimov. So let's continue on down. Andrea says, I wasn't sure if this was going to be a live stream today because of yesterday, but um, I can 2 live streams. Isn't too much for Sound Engraver. I don't know what that means. So if you're playing me and also playing another live stream simultaneously, that takes talent. That takes some good attention. Yeah, no, I think that's fine. Samuli, good to see you. Greetings, brothers and sisters. Thank you for coming. Good to have you. Aloise, also. Studio Super, good to see you as well. It looks like, do you have a new avatar? Let me see. Nice. I think that's one of your characters too, right? Is that one of your main protagonists? That's pretty sweet looking. That's nice. Okay, I think I got everyone, and I do apologize if I'm missing some. What I want to do, because this is going to be a stream slash rant. I have no idea. I'm totally doing this off the cuff. I have no notes. I only have feelings. I finished this book, this Prelude to Foundation, of the Asimov Foundation series, and that's 6 of 7 books. I might read the next book going forward. I have a copy. I might read it just so I could say I've read all 7 books. But I will say this. We'll get right into the discussion. I have to say, if you guys are interested in sci-fi, and if you're interested in Asimov in particular, I still think this is one of the better Christmas presents I got. It's a beautiful cover of the Foundation trilogy. As far as I'm concerned, this is the only set of stories you need to read concerning the entire Foundation series. I might be misremembering the dates, but the trilogy, this one right here, this really thick book right here, was written and released. It could have been written in the 40s. I don't know. I think it was released in the 50s. If I'm remembering that correct. I like Isaac Asimov. I like this set of stories and this trilogy, and I like his short fiction. I think he's a wonderful short fiction writer. He's very good with short stories. I still will stand by The Bicentennial Man being one of the better novellas that I've read. Maybe it's not a novella. Maybe it's a novelette. It's a very long story. It's not a short story. I don't know if it's as long as a novella. It's like right in between. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful piece of fiction, well written, and it works really, really well. I have yet to read his robotic fiction, his robotic novels. I've read a ton of his robot short stories, most of which I liked a lot. So I would still say that Isaac Asimov is, more than just a prolific writer of science fiction. I like him as a writer. But again, the trilogy, this is the go-to. This right here, that's all you need. So the series, if you're not aware, if I have this right, there are 2 sequels following the events of this trilogy, and then 2 prequels. I've read both sequels, and I've read the first prequel. The second prequel I have yet to read. I may read it just for the sake of saying I've read all 7 books, and I'll tell you which ones to read and which ones not to read. As far as I'm concerned, do not bother with the sequels. And as far as I'm concerned, I haven't read the second prequel, but don't bother with the prequels either. The trilogy, and maybe you guys want to fact check me, I think it was published in the 50s. The sequels and the prequels were published, I think, as late as the 80s. So if that's true, we're talking about a 30-year gap from what was really good to 30 years down the road. And it's not even just subpar, it's just full of conflict. Like, when I say conflict, I don't mean in the narrative. I'm talking about contradictions. It really, the sequels, yes, but this particular prequel involves Harry Seldon, who's really supposed to be the hero of humanity, setting him up as a hero for humanity before he passes away because he's an old man. This prequel involved him being like in his early 30s. I think he's 32. And just based on the events of the prequel, it is a book that takes away all the magic and all the mystique of what made the trilogy, the Foundation trilogy, so great. Now, maybe you've never read Asimov, maybe you don't like science fiction. I will be making this stream hopefully applicable to you with your love of fantasy, your love of the superhero genre, whatever fiction you like, whatever genre you like, maybe even nonfiction, for goodness sake. I want this stream to be a cautionary tale because Isaac Asimov really did fall. I think he fell from grace as it comes to creative stuff. So that's what we're gonna be talking about. And I think what I'll do is I'll get right into it and then get into the chat and then just talk about writers in general. No one no one is invulnerable. No one is safe. Like even if you're the most famous author out there, no one is safe from making a big mistake. And I kind of want to talk about writers with their creative choices and not really talking about death of the author or anything, but how writers can fall. How writers can fall very long, very far, very hard from what made their fiction so special in the first place. And if you guys have any examples as we go, that's great too. Let me take a swig of water real quick. I also put my violin back there because it covers up the cable, and I like people to know that I play violin. So, let's go ahead and talk about the um, just a very basic setup of the Foundation trilogy by Isaac Asimov. A trilogy I do recommend if you're interested in science fiction. It is very different. It was written in the 1950s, so if you're not used to that kind of writing and style back then, it's it's dense, but it's workable. I think people can comprehend what's going on effectively. But the setup of the Foundation trilogy really is, I would say, it can work like an anthology, and it's a fictional commentary of the fall of an empire. In this case, with science fiction, it's the Galactic Empire. And this can be traced, or not traced, but you can easily, Asimov, I think himself did, you can easily compare it, even in a fictitious way, to the Roman Empire. So if you want to talk about the great empire and then the fall of that great empire. Now, I am no expert on the Roman Empire, but I think, okay, yeah, let's make an analog. I thought that was really good of Isaac Asimov to make an analog of the fall of a great empire in a fictitious world it's an empire, I think, of 25 million worlds. And then you have the center world, Trantor, which is actually also, I think, locationally in the center of the galaxy. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think Isaac Asimov also works with the um, Milky Way galaxy. I think that is the galaxy he's working with. But in any case, it's close, locationally close to the center of the galaxy, and it is the most powerful planet, the most affluent planet, because it's the home of the emperor of an entire galactic galaxy, galactic empire of 25 million worlds and then some. um, but so it's the setup. Really, the trilogy is the setup of this man, this mathematician, this brilliant mathematician, Harry Seldon, who says, "Listen, based on my mathematical theory and statistics and my knowledge of history," he's an old man at this point, um, the fall of the empire is imminent. it's going to be, as it's going right now, it's going to be absolute anarchy and chaos for, I think, a period of 20,000 years. Like, I think it's a really immense, very immeasurable period of just chaos and anarchy. And of course, there's going to be death and starvation and famine and all sorts of things that come with the fall of a galactic empire. Well, the Empire's not too happy about this, and I'm not gonna spoil anything with the trilogy. I still highly recommend reading it. But the Empire's not too happy with this. They arrest Harry Seldon. He's like 2 years from death because he's an old man, and he says, "Listen, just keep me in custody, that's fine, but I have a way to not prevent the fall of the empire, but to make this interim of 1,000 years. So that way, it is going to be 1,000 years of chaos and anarchy and warlords and all that, but it's not going to be 20,000 years. So it's a very that's a very interesting motive and ambition for a man to say, "Hey, I'm not even going to see this anarchy. I'm not going to see this chaos. I'm not going to see the fall of the empire. It's going to happen." Over the next few generations, and then everything will ensue. But I still want the chaos to be reduced from 20,000 to 1,000 years. I think that's a noble pursuit. I think that's a noble cause. And so what the empire does is saying, well, we don't like you here. We don't think this is good for publicity. We're going to keep you basically on house arrest on this backwater planet Terminus until you pass away. So Selden has with him a team of people, like I can't remember how many exactly, but I think it's hundreds of people with their families working to um, sustain the knowledge or archive the knowledge that they have of all the galaxy, in addition to prepping for a better galactic empire in the future after the interim of 1,000 years has passed. That's basically it. And so he has set up what's called the foundation, or a foundation, or yeah, first foundation. It becomes a first foundation and a second foundation, which is a more mysterious foundation of people. And it's very, very interesting. Asimov sets up a very interesting, a very mysterious, intriguing conflict that can happen between the first foundation and the second foundation. These two groups of people that are very different. The first foundation specializes in technology and warfare and strategy and civilization and science and all that, the physical. And then the second foundation specializes in mentalics, or a hyper like a hyper specialization in changing the minds and will of people. So very interesting conflict there, because you have an uber military power of the first foundation over the span of 500 years or whatever into the interim. And then you have a second foundation that can, okay, they might not have the weapons, they might not have the advanced sciences, but they can bend the will of those operating the military, operating the science. I'm like, that's cool. I mean, and it's very fantastical. It's not science fiction that is scientific. It's more science fiction that is fantastical. Very interesting. And then you've got this really interesting antagonist called the Mule. No spoilers, because I'm not going to spoil anything involving the Foundation trilogy, just in case you need to see. Yeah, there it is. So it's a very good setup. So we have this antagonizing force that is called the Mule. And the way the Mule is set up and the way the Mule conflict is resolved is very engaging. And it ends, the trilogy ends on this kind of mysterious ending. And yeah, you could pause it, you could speculate, like, oh, what's going to happen now? After these few hundred years of this terrible interim of warlords and anarchy. And it's really left for the readers to guess. And yeah, it's open-ended, and you can expand on that. And Asimov did over the next 30 years. And I don't know why he did. Maybe he had pressure. Maybe in the 80s, like the 1970s and 80s, they pressured him to expand on his mysterious Foundation trilogy. And I just wish he left it as a question. Like leave a series or a book as a question. Like, could this happen? What is going to happen here? Well, what happened is he ended the conflict in the trilogy with more conflict, more mystery. Like, what can can the second Foundationers get along with the first Foundationers, or would they totally overcome the first Foundation by sheer will and power over someone else's will? It's very intriguing. Then the sequels came along in the 1980s. Man, don't make sequels. Let's just say that. Like, you guys throw in the chat how like what a good sequel is. But the sequels for the Foundation trilogy, Foundation's Edge and Forward. No, Forward the Foundation or oh, Foundation and Earth. Yes. Okay, so Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth. Foundation's Edge, I will say, had a very strong beginning and middle. And then the end happened and it destroyed the magic and the mystique of the Foundation trilogy, just destroyed it. And I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess let's see what's gonna happen with the next book, Foundation and Earth." That was an atrocity of a piece of fiction, for a lot of reasons I've explained it in a previous stream, and you can go back to that. But Foundation and Earth basically stripped all the magic and motive behind the Selden plan and behind Harry Selden. And in a very terrible way, like a terrible marriage coming together, Asimov thought it was a good idea to put his law of robotics and his world of robotics into the Foundation trilogy. Now, strictly speaking, if you want to know, the Foundation trilogy and the series involves a science fiction world that is completely devoid of aliens. As far as we know. Of course, that could be expanded on with things like the Apple TV series or whatever. I denounce that series, but whatever. I mean, if they're going off the prequels and the sequels, it's gonna make for a terrible show because those are terrible books. But anyway, what I was gonna say is that, Asimov thought and maybe he had pressure, maybe there was social and professional pressure to include his robotics in the Foundation world. That world is strictly a galaxy of human beings. There are no aliens. There are no, anthropomorphic intelligence. It's just human beings. Now that might be boring to some people, but if it's but but again, some of these human beings had mental specialty. Like they specialized in mentalics in a very powerful and in a very scary way. If they had their way and they were not benevolent about it, that's scary. And those are and they're still human beings. They just have a very specific speciality about them. Cool. I don't care. Like, yeah, give me some aliens in science fiction. I think you can work with that. And I'll include. I know I'm including one alien race in my science fiction, but it's going to be predominantly a human race thing in the context of how that can work between planets and planetary relationships and all of that. That's an aside, though. So Asimov, at least with his Foundation world, did not include aliens, but he still had he did include, I can't spoil it, but the antagonist that is the mule works perfectly as an alien substitute. This mule is a person, and I'm not going to spoil anything more because it's awesome, but a very powerful figure who has alien traits. So Asimov was working with that, but maybe there were editors in the 1980s, maybe in the 1970s. I would love to know if there's commentary on this. I should kind of do some digging. Maybe there was like an editorial pressure saying, "Okay, Asimov, we love your law of robotics. We love your robot series. We love your robot novels. We love your robot short fiction. You need to include that in your Foundation series." And he did for whatever reason he wanted to. Maybe he had it all along. He had it planned all along. I don't know. But it was a horrible, horrible thing. It's like putting a guy and a girl together and you know there's not going to be chemistry. You know that the marriage is going to end sourly, and that's what happened with the Foundation setup and then with the law of robotics. So what do I mean? And so I'm not spoiling anything of the trilogy. Go read it, but I will be spoiling elements of the sequel trilogy, and I will be spoiling elements of the first prequel book, Prelude to the Foundation. Prelude to Foundation is the title. So basically, I've talked about my complaints with that last book, Foundation and Earth, and you guys can check it out on a different stream. I really did. I included that in the stream, but you've got these cast of characters pursuing knowledge of Earth, pursuing knowledge of the origin of the human race. Because at this point, Earth is a legend. It's not even for most worlds, it's completely forgotten, and for some worlds, it's completely taboo. Like you don't mention Earth. Like there's like a spiritual significance to it. There's like a superstition. Earth to some planets is a superstition. You got a cast of characters who are very unlikable in Foundation and Earth, especially Golan Trevize. I did not like him at all, and he's kind of the leader of the group, unfortunately. Well, he's pursuing knowledge of Earth. He wants to find Earth. He has this sensibility, kind of like how Harry Seldon had a sensibility of how things were to be, and how basically the fate of the galaxy as it was with Harry Seldon is on the shoulders of this man Golan Trevize. And we come to find, spoiler alert, that he had these really strong sensibilities and this gift to maneuver around very powerful forces like the first and second foundations. All because he found Earth, but it was inhabitable. They found that the moon was inhabited by one sole being, and that was a robot. A robot who for 20,000 years controlled everything. And I found in Prelude to Foundation that the same robot, as a different character in this story, he's trying to protect humanity, following his law of robotics, but on a galactic scale, not on an individual scale. This one singular robot, and this robot had the power to, I don't know how. It's silly. It can be totally fantastical, but it's still silly. This one robot had the power to manipulate all human action, all courses of human action over the span of 25 million worlds, over the span of a galaxy, over the span of 20,000 years. This one single robot. So he's pretty much God. He's pretty much playing God. Can't I really can't understand why. This was a really bad take on, at least from what I've read of the short fiction involving Asimov's robots, because his robots, his short story on robots is very good. Most of the stories. And then also his short stories on the Multivac, the super powerful computer. Asimov knows how to write for robots. That he did not implement it in a not in a good way at all. He did not implement the robot. It it destroyed the whole lore of the Foundation series. It was horribly done, horribly done. So this robot called Daniil at the end of Foundation and Earth, he basically, from the get-go, we find from Foundation and Earth, after the fact, after the death of Harry Seldon, after centuries have passed, 500 years have passed, we find that this robot really controlled the the course of action that was the Seldon plan, which strongly implies that this robot, the singular robot controlled the mathematician himself, Harry Seldon. So this man Harry Seldon, who I thought was an altruistic mathematician trying to mitigate the severity of a 20,000 year period of anarchy. He's trying to, he knew he couldn't prevent it, but he wanted to reduce it from 20,000 years to 1,000 years. And he knew his mathematics could. All of that was, he was just a puppet. And his strings were pulled by this robot, Daniil. Now, that was the setup. I was actually a longer setup of the sequels. Again, I still recommend reading the trilogy. So let's talk about the prelude to the foundation. Um, I'm gonna talk a little bit. I might come back to Daniel, the robot, because he does appear again in this book. Yeah, I won't say it's ham-fisted, but it's yeah. My title says I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. But like the more I think about it, the more it makes me mad. One sec, let me grab some water. Okay, so let's see. So we'll start first. Why this book is terrible? Why this book stinks? Um, we'll start with world building, and then we'll start with and then we'll finish with characters. Because Harry Seldon is the main protagonist of this book. The world building. This book, you're on Trantor the whole book, which is great. I love Trantor. It's a very interesting world. I feel like it's really interesting after the sacking of Trantor, which takes place, I think, between the second and third books, like if I remember correctly. But anyway, it's a very fascinating place. You're on Trantor, the planet, the whole book, which is fine because it's very diverse, culturally speaking, topographically. Well, it's not topographically different besides one area. It's Coruscant. This was the original Coruscant. Trantor was, and why the Foundation trilogy is such an interesting setup is it's to show you the fall of an empire. Now, why would a great galactic empire fall? Well, because the core planet that is Trantor cannot sustain itself. It's got like 40 billion people and they live inside or underground. Like they hardly go to what they call the upper side, which is just clouds and wind and cold. Everyone stays down in the ground. Everything is simulated where you can perceive different weather. Like maybe it's rainy one day, maybe it's sunlight in the woods another day. Like it's everything is highly simulated. So people they don't have cabin fever because everything is well simulated. Everything is quite lovely and very, very advanced on Trantor. But the setting is important because Trantor, the reason why the empire is falling is it is so massive in population and it's so intricate in the city dwelling and the city building. It's like in a grid. It's a whole planet of city, an underground city and midground city or whatever. It has to sustain itself by importation of all sorts of things, all sorts of food, like the surrounding planets. They're agricultural planets, they're farmlands. Trantor is dependent on other planets, other systems for things like farms and food. And I'm like, okay. I'm thinking that's great. That's a good setup for not being able to sustain itself. Thus the fall, the imminent fall. Well, in this book, Asimov thought it was a good idea to expand interesting world building. And this is a cautionary tale for you guys who like your world building. Don't make your world so interesting, so scientifically interesting, where it actually breaks the lore and the setup of the Foundation trilogy. And this is what that book did. Apparently, based on Seldon's adventures on Trantor, you can actually get by just fine eating your own grown food on Trantor. Now, granted, the food stinks. It smells. It doesn't taste good. It's not really edible like the way we think food should be edible because we like flavor, we like scent, we like texture. That aside, the Trantorians are used to that because they can make their own stuff. It's like, wait, I thought you relied on other planets to get your food. Oh, no, 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 says one character, Cheddar Hummin, which I will talk about in a bit. No, they can sustain themselves. The food, the importation of food is actually for the imperial sector, for the people who are highly affluent, highly educated, and the importation of food is luxury food, things that are luxurious. And it's like, well, yeah, that was actually in the setup of this Foundation trilogy. That's true, but not exclusively. Food was imported. food to sustain families of 40 billion people. That was the problem, and that was one of the factors that would have the empire fall. They had to rely on food from other planets. That was the setup. But no, no, no. Now in this book, they grow their own food. It's like it doesn't taste right. It tastes awful, but it's still sustenance. And it's like, well, okay, you ruled out a real major factor of how Trantor will implode from the inside and how there will be warring factions surrounding Trantor. Because now it's like having a major shareholder, a group of shareholders for a company. It's like, we are going to dissolve your business because we have the stakes. Like, we have our say because we give you food. Perfect setup for a conflict. Totally disregarded. So that's the first thing. Second thing is having a planet of 40 billion people takes a lot of energy, a lot of electricity. And yeah, okay, so that's easy for a planet now to implode and have a lot of conflict. Well, so you get your energy from solar power, great, and some sort of star power, some things to do with the orbit, and so and that's everyone's speculation, by the way, who live on Trantor. Actually, I take that back. Citizens of Trantor know that they have heating resources, specific heating resources in sectors of Trantor. One called Dahl in particular, where we are in the events of the book. And so Trantor has sectors with specific heating apparatuses and flow and energy that can sustain the planet. So it's like, okay, well, now the planet can sustain itself, electricity speaking, energy speaking. It's totally, it's got its own power. It's like, okay, well, I guess Trantor is doing fine. I guess it's doing fine on its own. So there was a lot of things in the world building that broke up, that totally broke the imminent danger of Trantor collapsing on itself. The reason why the way the empire is going to fall in the Foundation trilogy is that the empire starts drawing and reserving things for itself. What that means is all influence and all power and authority and officers and people, to protect the worlds on the periphery, they're pulling in. So the worlds on the periphery are out to defend themselves against warring factions and warlords. That's the whole premise. But if Trantor can sustain itself with food and energy, I mean, the only thing it's got going against it is usurping the emperor, which is possible. I'm not ruling that out, and they kind of imply it in the book. But it's just to before I get too redundant, it's destroying what was set up before. All because Asimov wanted to include some historical commentary on things with some scientific commentary on things, because this book read like a commentary more than an adventure. Now, science fiction writers do that, by the way, but it wasn't done well. So that's the first thing. World building. Don't make your world building, especially with science fiction, don't make your world building so interesting that it breaks the lore of previously established setups and settings. So that's my first thing. The second is the character Harry Seldon himself. And I'm sad. Now, I'm not sad like I'm one of those people that I can read this without reading the other books, and I'll be fine. Like, people say, "Oh, well, you're mad about what happens in the sequels and prequels. Are you gonna not read this anymore?" No, this is great. Just by itself, the trilogy is great. Don't need the prequels. Don't need the sequels. That said, I am very disappointed with what Asimov did with Harry Seldon, and there are a few things. The there are a few things. The biggest complaint I have about Harry Seldon is that throughout the whole book, he is a passive character. And I mean a tragically passive character. And for two different reasons. Um, the first reason so what's a passive character, what's an active character? A passive character is a character that is going along his own story really at the direction of the author or at the direction of other characters or other circumstances. Things happen to him. And it's and people might say, "Well, what's wrong with that? Things happen to characters, and that's part of the whole plot." Like, okay, this person is under a circumstance outside their control. That makes for a good plot. That makes for a good setting. This is true. What the problem is he's taking it like he's viewing it as a film. He's got some personality, not really it's not likable at first. He The book started strong, by the way. Actually, the first few chapters were actually pretty strong. I was like, "Okay, interesting setup." He's kind of cheerful, he's kind of aloof, he's a mathematician, and then the emperor wants him, and then everything, gets into, like, the call to adventure. So he goes from place to okay, basically he at the very start of the story, the emperor wants him, he wants to talk to him. And then the mathematician, Harry Seldon, says, "Listen, what you want of me, I can't give because this is a theory that I gave this talk. It's a theory. It's not practical. It can't be used in an actual social application like predicting the future." Because his emphasis on psychohistory at the time right now in the events, it's a theory. It's all theory. It's not practical. It's not practical science. He just is positing a theory. Well, the empire wants him for that because it's like, "Well, does that mean you can predict the future?" He said at this point he says, "No, it's not predicting the future. It's just eliminating what definitely won't happen based on people's actions and statistics." But he's very adamant with the emperor and says, "We can't apply this." Emperor's not too happy about that. He sends Harry Seldon away, but he sends an advisor of sorts, Demerzel, and to go after him, to pursue him. And if Harry Seldon can't deliver what he wants in time, because the pursuit of psychohistory would be a lifelong journey, according to Seldon, then like, "Oh, well, execute him. I don't care." One second, one second. Right. Okay, so he's sent away, but he's being pursued by this very cold, calculating, very smart advisor called Demerzel. And so Demerzel is after him. He's expecting Harry Seldon to just go back to his home planet, Helicon. But Seldon is about to go. He's about to stay on Trantor for one more day, then go back to Helicon the very next day. But he's intercepted by this mysterious, very smart journalist called Cheddar Hummin. And basically, what's happening is Hummin is saying, "Listen," he's saying to Seldon, "There's going to be an imminent fall of the empire. There's this perpetual degeneration of things, of technology, of all sorts of stuff, the degeneration of society, and only you have the solution to mitigate that or to alleviate some of the severity of what's to come." And I thought this is really strange. It made me mad because it's like, okay, so this guy has more of that proactive nature, that proactive motive. Like, you have to find the solution. I know you can do it. I heard your talk. You have to find the solution. So he's helping. So Cheddar Hummin is helping Seldon escape, like hide, like he's hiding at a university. He hides at different places, and by the help of Cheddar Hummin. But Cheddar Hummin, he's got stuff to do. He's got social connections. He's gotta find places and people to help Seldon travel and hide and travel and hide. And basically, the book, he sends this one woman, and we'll talk about her too. Doors Venabili, I think is her last name, but Doors is her first name. I wish it was Doris. Doors is kind of it's like doors. It's like the the threshold between one room and another, or an outside door. But anyway, he sends her to be effectively Harry Seldon's bodyguard. Now, Harry Seldon is from Helicon, who apparently citizens of Helicon can actually wrestle pretty well, so he can get out of a jam. But she's like basically his bodyguard. Like there's forever in the story. She's like, I gotta protect you. I gotta protect you. And she's like 26 and he's 32. It's kind of a strange relationship. It's like he can take care of himself. Well, we find that she's actually very capable. She's a very capable fighter, a very highly reflexive, very strong, wields knives very well. She's a very capable fighter. A little bit later. Now, I want to actually say a couple things. I'm not going to go over the whole story, but what I want to say is that setup where Harry Seldon thinks psychohistory is just a theory. It's not practical. Cheddar Hammond believes it's practical. Demerzel and the Emperor think they hope it's practical, and Doors, the lady bodyguard, is trying to inspire Selden to find something practical. And over the course of the story, over the course of places, he is seeing now more and more that it can be practical. But he's so full of self-doubt the whole way. And he's petty. He's not a likable personality. He's entitled at some point, where it's really not appropriate to be entitled. It's like you are subject to this class of people that you strongly disagree with because you're in hiding and you're under their protection. Sorry, that's just the way the ball bounces. So he's very. I got the sense that Asimov thought this would be a great play. Like I would love to see this scene on stage, and it would be a great scene on stage. But it just comes across, makes Harry Seldon come across as very, very unlikable. And so that's the first thing. So the course of events happens where they go to a place in hiding, and then they see it's really social commentary of Asimov saying this hyper religious, hyper chaste society. Basically, it's always the commentary. Oh, the men are superior to the women. I'm like, okay, I get it. Whatever. It's a society you disagree with. Okay, whatever. And then they go to another section where it's a very different society. Women and men are kind of the same. They're equal, and they're more, I guess, progressive, whatever. But there's a lot of racial tension, or not. I don't think it's racial tension. People say it is. I don't think it is. I think it's more class tension. There's an upper class of the sector, and then there's like the bottom of the barrel part of the sector, and there's the slums. Like there's like the hood part of the sector. And they go from one place to another. So Harry Seldon and Doors, they go from one place to another. And I kid you not, until that very last moment of danger, there was finally danger, but there was a setting after setting where, oh, they're in danger. They're not in danger. There are so many Deus Ex Machinas involving Cheddar Hammond, who protects them, who saves them, who gets them out of a bind, who persuades different antagonistic people to let them go. He disappears and he appears. He disappears and he appears, and it's like I'm getting annoyed with this because Harry Seldon should take some action. Well, they do take action, but they seem to get into trouble a lot more. And then you're with Harry Seldon, you're just going off of fanciful ideas, like, oh, he's like, oh, they have robots. Do you know about a robot? I think they have a robot in this religious institution, this little temple here. I need to find it. And so they sneak in. They find a metal man. They don't find like a human, like a robot that looks like a human, because that's what he wants. He wants a robot as kind of like a database for all the information he needs regarding history, because he doesn't know a lot of history, even though Doors is a historian. Anyway, so they're in danger, except when they're not. They get out of the situation unscathed. There is a situation finally where they are in danger. He can wrestle 2 men at a time, which is great. And then she can wield knives. Doors can wield knives. But besides that, it's not really dangerous. I don't feel tension. It's like, oh, we're going to execute you. Oh, we're going to send you to the Empire. And it's like, no, probably not, because Cheddar Hammond is going to come in and he's going to persuade you otherwise. So I was kind of getting annoyed with this Cheddar Hammond guy. He seemed like he should have had his own story, not Harry Seldon. So Harry Seldon was a completely passive character the whole time. And he would only do things based on motives he didn't understand, like motives that were out of character. He admits this at the end of the book. He's like, I don't even know why I followed, you, Cheddar Hum, and I don't even know why I thought to think this. I don't even know why this made me think that and made me pursue that. He's just like he's just following fancy, and he doesn't know why. It's like in the back of his mind, and he can't really untap it. And I'm hoping for a eureka moment at any point saying, "This is how I do math. This is how I do history." And that didn't happen. Now, the reason this is a major spoiler. The reason why Harry Seldon does the reason why he's so passive, the reason why he does not know why he chooses to do the things he does and he feels like it's out of character or he's kind of confused, like there's something in the back of my mind and I can't untap it. The reason for that is his protector, not Doors, but his other protector, Cheddar Hammond, this mysterious journalist with all these connections of all these different types of people. Well, Cheddar Hammond, plot twist, ended up being Demerzel himself. So the person who wanted Selden to begin with, who wanted to pursue Selden on behalf of the Empire, on behalf of humanity. Cool. Awesome. And what Harry Seldon comes to find, I think on his own initiative, but at this point I'm really not sure, he comes to find that Demerzel, so Cheddar Hammond being Demerzel, is none other than R. Daniil, who we see in Foundation and Earth, Book 5, the second sequel book. And he's the robot. He's the savior, this 20,000 year long savior, finally finding a way after 20,000 years since being on Earth and another planet called Aurora. Finally, after 20,000 years, he found one person, one mathematician that can save all humanity. And he's been manipulating Harry Seldon the whole time. But why does he want Harry Seldon? If he can do it himself, he claims he doesn't know psychohistory, but I don't know. He's a robot. He's got to be uber smart at this point to be manipulating all of humanity. The reason why he chooses Harry Seldon, a human being, to do this work for him is because he doesn't like, Daniil does not like influencing human beings. And that probably goes against his law of robotics, who he probably thinks mentally influencing and psychologically influencing a human being is harmful to the human being. Maybe I don't know. It really wasn't specified at the end of the book. Maybe it is later. I don't know. But the whole point is like he could do this whole thing himself. In fact, he does this whole thing himself because we see him at the end of book 5 of the whole series. Harry Seldon is a mathematician who's no more than a pawn in the whole game. He's not the impetus. His math, his psychohistory is not the impetus for saving humanity like it was set up in this book. Now, I claim he is. I claim he is as a reader because this was a good setup. That he was the impetus that had a trajectory of events over the span of 500 years, getting into 1,000 years, to establish a second empire that was better than the original empire. That's the whole setup of this book because of his psychohistory. And that's what I'm going to stand by as a reader. I don't like that this sole singular robot called Daniil is this 20,000 year old robot who's been puppeteering. He's been the puppet master ever since. From before the events of the trilogy and from the 500 years after the events of the trilogy. Working it all. And he still thinks he wants Harry Seldon to do it because he doesn't feel comfortable manipulating people. It's like you did this for years. You did this for centuries before Harry Seldon existed. I don't get it. So he thought this was the perfect thing to do, like this psychohistory that by the way, Harry Seldon doesn't have the answer at the end of this book for psychohistory. You know what he has? He has power, he has influence, he has everything he could want in the world to do this science, to do this math. He's not this underdog I thought he was, to go to speak, to the Empire on behalf of all of humanity. but to me, he is. Like, as far as the trilogy is concerned, he is. Now, the ending was really, really dumb. So you got Harry Seldon has all the protection, all the affluence, all the influence of the whole world, of the whole galaxy. He has all the powerful protection of the whole galaxy to work this mathematics. And first off, he doesn't have the answer. He's only scratching the surface. That's fine because we knew that it was going to be a lifelong venture. But he, at the end of the book, says, and I'm going to say it crassly, screw all of that. I don't care about solving the problem of humanity. I don't care about this mathematics. All I want is this woman Doors, my protector. And he doesn't even want her protection. He wants her. With the knowledge, this is where it gets really creepy. With the knowledge that Doors herself is not just a helper of Cheddar Hummin, aka Demerzel, aka Danielle the robot. She herself is a robot. Cheddar Hummin's social circle and connections it was strongly implied that there are robots around that look like you and me. So female version of robot and Cheddar Hummin, a male version of a robot. And he and Doris tells him, she says, I've kissed, I've made love, but it means nothing to me because I can't feel it. And I guess she has a conscience to protect Harry Seldon on his adventure, and that's pretty much it. And then he's dejected at first, and then he says, "Screw that! I'm going to pursue it." He kisses her, and then at the very last line of the book says, "Oh, Harry, please, more, kiss me more." So like, I guess she's awakened, like, "Oh, I do love you," or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh. So Harry Seldon is like, screw all the psychohistory. I'm not going to do it if I don't have Doors by my side. I love her. I've loved her since the beginning, and he says this knowing she's a robot, and that's this book. That's his book. I'm like, Asimov, what were you thinking? And some reviewers, I heard one reviewer said, well, this is a commentary on couples who love each other and understand one another and who are compatible with one another, but they're different racially, they're different religiously, they're different culturally. It's like, no, 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 no. You cannot compare that. We're talking about a human and a robot. We're not talking about two humans of different cultures, different religions, different languages. We're talking about a human and a robot. You can't compare it. It sounds like that's how Asimov worked the robot lore into his Foundation lore. And so I denounce it. We're gonna talk. Well, I'll talk to you guys in the chat now. We're gonna denounce it, and we're gonna talk about how writers fall so hard. So I denounce the prequels. I certainly denounce the sequels. But again, I'm just showing this beautiful book. This is Harry Seldon, the guy who was completely altruistic from the start. All he did want was to save humanity and mitigate and mitigate the period of anarchy from 20,000 years to 1,000 years. He knew he could do it, and that's why he set up the Foundation. But this Harry Seldon, this isn't Harry Seldon. He's just all petty and full of self-doubt, then falls in love with a woman he discovers to be a robot, but he doesn't care. He still loves her. I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna grab some water. So that's my take. So we'll get into the chat and then talk a little bit more about just writers, how they are responsible for upholding their fiction. Don't ruin what was already good. Prof, I think double check if you're still with us, if you're not tutoring. But I think Prof was talking about the Underworld series that was a very good stretch of films until like the last film, like the fourth film, like where they drop the ball, where they just don't expand on what's already good, but they drop the ball. Thank you, Studio Super. I do appreciate the super chat for 499. You say, "I denounce the sequels," a phrase so many Star Wars fans can relate to. I think it's like an epidemic of some kind, like the disease. I don't know. Thank you for the super chat. I Asimov wrote the sequels and prequels about 30 years, a whole generation, like a generation and a half of time outside the Foundation trilogy. Now, if he had this in the works since the 50s, okay, but it's not okay, we'll get into the chat, I promise, but I wanna say this before I forget. This is not a my complaint on Asimov is not a death of the author thing. It was like, "Oh, this is my sole interpretation as a reader, and this was the interpretation of the author." I'm not saying that. Asimov absolutely wrote Harry Seldon the way he did for all its flaws, for all the contradictions. He wrote the world the way he did for all his contradictions. Writers are not scot-free. You know, they don't get off scot-free just because they wrote the book. They are accountable. Writers, artists alike. Whoever you are, whatever you do, you make a film, you write a story, you make a comic, whatever the case is, you are responsible for keeping the story good, and you are not invulnerable to making the story bad just because you're the author. Asimov dropped the ball. That was not a good route to take for Harry Seldon. That was not a good world building route to take as far as the world of Trantor. It was certainly the worst route to take to involve his robots in the Foundation lore. I mean, yeah, he can do it, but he did it wrong. He did it poorly. Uh, he should have left the Foundation just as a galaxy of human beings and left the robots out. He should have left the legend of Earth out, like Earth and robots involving the Earth and the moon and the neighboring planets. All of that should have just been its own separate thing. Should have been its own separate thing. He dropped the ball, and he's responsible for that. And if people want to fight me on this, let me just give you this example I was thinking earlier today, saying, well, he's the writer, he's the author, he's the artist, what he says goes. I'm like, yeah, but doesn't mean it's a good thing. It's kind of like if you were to watch the end of Star Wars, and do you remember, you know, that beautiful scene with the Ewoks and Luke Skywalker burning the suit on a pyre, like as honoring Anakin Skywalker burning the suit of Darth Vader on the pyre, and then he's looking at it, and then he beholds Yoda, and his father is a Force ghost, and Obi-Wan is a Force ghost, and then I was like, oh wow, this feels great, and then Leia comes in and embraces her brother, and then it was totally George Lucas's call. Let me be extreme, okay? It was totally George Lucas's call to all of a sudden just stab her in the gut, and then she dies. Okay, so George Lucas hypothetically makes that call. Does that make it right? No. That's messed up. That's messed up. So the author and the artist is solely responsible for upholding what was already good to begin with. What was already going well. So that's what I had to say. I wanted to say that before I lost not losing my train of thought, but just before I forgot. Let's welcome everyone else because there's a lot of y'all to say. Thank you guys for letting me rant for like an hour. Now we're going to go into the chat. Ace says, bought the Foundation books recently and gonna try to start this week. Okay. Just the Foundation trilogy. That's all. Please don't. If you have to bother with the sequels, just read Foundation's Edge. I did not care for the ending. I thought it was really just the wrong route to take. But the events in the beginning and the middle, I think are pretty interesting. I think are really interesting. So I would encourage people to read Foundation's Edge, just with the expectation that the ending kind of takes a dump on the whole thing. It's one of those examples where, oh, the deeper it is, the better it is, and no, it's not. Um, Yeah. People, like, they try to be deep, they try to be expansive, and it's like, no, sometimes it doesn't work. Andrea says, you meant to say, I guess 2 live streams isn't too much for Sound Engraver. My mistake, 2 live streams. Oh, you mean are you talking about, well, I was on a live stream last night with Soundtracks with Birdman. We had a great discussion afterward. I realized I was listening to it. Sometimes I interrupt. I haven't been on a live stream with people in a long time, so there were a couple times where I was interrupting. But, yeah, Soundtracks with Birdman, there was a Star Wars concert online that I attended, and it was great. Unfortunately, the stream was just so low in volume, but we had some good discussion afterward. So that's on Daniel's stream if you wanna catch if you the stream, the link is there, I think, for another day or another week, I can't remember, to see the show, but, the post-concert discussion actually was where we were really talking about film music and where film composers drop the ball for sure. Studio Super, thank you so much again for your 9.99. You say, I tell you, in the writer's world, when they make their own properties, they get on this power trip and act like the rules of writing no longer apply to them. I have all the power. It's such a trap. It's such a trap. Um, you know, the theme of my stream and my channel is producing and promoting good art. And just because it's yours doesn't mean you have complete say in the matter. You can't you can't just have an idea and say, "Well, I want this idea to work, so therefore I'm going to make it work at the expense of everything else." I would just strongly caution people or maybe even advise, at least in this day and age with our pop culture and everything. If you wanna write a book series, that's fine. I have the long form, the long fiction I'm writing is a series. It's gonna be between 4 and 5 books. It's gonna be 5 short books or 4 long books. I haven't decided. Or relatively shorter books, if it's 5. I think 5 is a good number. I wouldn't exceed 5, if I can help it. But that's a series I have planned from start to finish. I know the beginning, I know what's gonna happen in the middle, and I know what's gonna happen at the end, and I'm not gonna mess with that. Now, will I have books going forward with other characters in the lore? As long as God has designed as has willed for me to have breath for the next day and the next 10 years. Hopefully, I'd love to live up to 90 years old, that'd be great. I mean, so as long as the Lord has me on this planet, yeah, that's a total possibility, but, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna mess with what I know is already good. Just because it's a good idea for s that's the thing is, Asimov had a good idea with his robot series or his robot lore, he just messed it up with the trilogy. Yes, marvelous. Welcome. Good to see you. You say Bicentennial Man is interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. And at the very end, it's asking if a robot wills and desires to be a human, does that make him a human being? Honestly, in the real world setting, and if such a figure existed, I would say you are as human as you can be. Um, just be fine with how much you are a human, and then be fine with being a robot. So I don't really agree at the very end of what the character decides, or it's beautiful, by the way. It's like he does a very dramatic, a beautiful move to be a human. It's touching, and it touches the lives and the hearts of all humanity on Earth. It's a beautiful story. Would I really think that the robot is still human for all he does? There are many, many human excuse me. There are many human elements of this figure, this bicentennial man. Um, could I say with confidence he's completely human? Probably not. It's like if like an animal, like a two-legged animal decides like even if that animal is intelligent and decides to get rid of his tail, his fur, his snout, whatever, and he goes through extensive surgery to look human, it's like he's still an animal. Um, but it's still a beautiful story. It's a really good story. I like it a lot. Oh, Ace, you say, "What are your thoughts on Ray Bradbury's books?" I love them. Well, here's the thing. I haven't read the most popular book, which is for Fahrenheit 451. Um, I need to read that story. I've read Martian Chronicles, which is really trippy. And then I read his have I read some of his short stories? I can't remember. I think I have. I would have to look at it. But I am a fan just based on what I read there, and then also his story, Something Wicked This Way Comes. I'm just a fan of him. He knows how to write. He's got his own signature. He knows how to expand on the visceral. He can make you see things and smell things like as if you were there. And I was like, dang, I would love to have that, like know how to place a reader in the setting like he does. It's really cool. He's also got a crazy imagination, which is good. Uh, Marvelous says, "My dad has concerning the Foundation prequels. Your dad has it. Just reading the summary turned me off. I think a story involving Selden would have been interesting. But he was so tragically passive a character. Everyone decided things for him, even his mental state, even his mentation. Now, I'm not saying some outside force controlling the mentation of a character isn't interesting. I think it could be used done very, very well. But such a character under a direct psychological control, I would still want that character to be I was gonna say active and passive at the same time. No, I'm not gonna say that. No, active. I would still want them to be proactive. He was to an extent, but not a good extent. Like I really wanted to root for this Harry Seldon character. But unfortunately people did things to him. Circumstances happened to him and he was just going with the flow. If if you write a character that is either brainwashed or psychologically manipulated in a fantastical science fiction way, um, I would strongly, strongly advise that the character, even in moments of self-doubt, would be proactive about the situation. Let's say they discover something, it's like, "Oh my goodness, this has been happening to me, and I wasn't even aware of it." Because something that is stronger than anything scientific is the conscience and the personal individual will of the person. That can't be lassoed in. You know, the unconscious, the subconscious, that cannot be completely controlled, even by a very powerful sci-fi force, even by like if it was a powerful alien technology. You still have, even if you are completely brainwashed, you have the will and you have the subconscious and the unconscious. That is a very important premise that you can say, "Oh, no, I'm not completely controlled. I can take matters in my own hands." And so if you have such a character, just make that character proactive. Make that character an active character. I think there can be a good balance between passive and active, but not utterly passive. Well, not if it's the main character. I think you could do that with a side character. If Harry Seldon was a featured character, but still, again, I don't like it. I don't like it. You know? I don't like the he had an altruistic motive in the trilogy, and it was perfect. Asimov did not need to tamper with it, dang it. Thanks again, man. Thank you for the super chat, Studio Super. Appreciate that very, very much. Also go check out, are you still found on X, Studio Super, with your comics? I haven't I'm playing with the idea of going back to X. I haven't decided yet, but it's for a completely different reason. It's not for Sound Engraver to show up. But you say for 9.99, thank you so much. A character that goes with the flow and just has things happen to him is a recipe to making a villain. That's a good point. Yes, yes. Yeah, like the perfect example is Penguin from the Batman lore. One believes he's responsible for nothing, that it is all life's fault. That's a perfect example. Villains, now I personally like proactive villains. But the setup to making such a character would be because life happened just so happened to him. And then he's mad about the situation. Yeah, exactly. That's great. Let me continue on with the chat. Yeah, thanks for again for the super chats. Do appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have to put this up. I knew it was gonna happen. I knew it was inevitable. Ye do I call thee forth, Trantor. Oh, the sad thing is that that name for that troll was made after the lore of Asimov. So whatever. Whatever. That's so funny. I knew my professor was gonna do that. Professor Geek with his earnest lore. All right. Mhm. Final Fantasy says that there's plenty of things where writers go wrong, especially newly written things. But the one thing they get wrong right out of the gate is too much world building. Yeah, I mean, a very appropriate, a very proper example of good world building that is immense is Lord of the Rings. And especially with decades past with the Tolkien estate and Christopher Tolkien, his son, they were able to archive his notes. They were able to put it in an anthology, in a tragedy like with Children of Hurin, and with things like the Silmarillion. But none of that does none of that contradict. I don't think any of that contradicts any of the lore established in the Third Age, and also with things like the Silmarillion. It's good stuff. Good stuff. Alois says, "I'll never pass up a chance to study writing and storytelling." I don't think a commie like Asimov had any grace to begin with, though. I mean, yeah, well, I don't know exactly his. I know he does have political sentiments and then also religious sentiments that I would be dynamically opposed to. But I can't knock him for his short stories. Like, not I'm not saying every short story is great right out of the gate. In fact, I do have a list. I put like 2 stars, gold star plus another gold star, and then like little circles for like honorable mentions. I have that list somewhere. Maybe I feel like did I do a video about that? I think I did a couple of videos on that in my science fiction playlist. I can't remember. I have to go back to check. But if I haven't, then I should, because some of the stuff is really good. Some of it's hit or miss. But a lot of it's really, really good. But just because you have a good thing with the Foundation trilogy and a good thing with the robot lore doesn't mean you put them 2 together. Like, a good thing here and a good thing there does not always guarantee a good thing as a marriage. It's like, no. No. All right. Um, yeah, I need to read a little bit more world history, Brian. You mentioned the British Empire and then the Han Dynasty. Yeah. Yeah. Um, is that Han or Hun? I don't know. Can't remember. Final Fantasy, you say, quote, Patrick Rothfuss, who I think is a fantasy writer. I haven't read him. It's easy for an author to get so caught up in the details of the world they created that they go off the rails and give us more than is really necessary for the story. Oh, I wanted to mention about Tolkien is like, if you've got a world, like a really immense world, like with Middle Earth, put it in an anthology. or put it in a set of short stories. Not everything has to be a novel length, and certainly not everything has to be put into the novels you already have. Like novels as film, as graphic novels, as comics, they should all be their own separate story. Like just kind of as a side rant, um, ah, props for young Ripa for trying to start a comic book universe, but so far what he's put out, I've only read one of his stories, but there's been a lot of criticism on his stories. I read Alpha Core. It was not a good story. Even behind the pen of Chuck Dixon, it was not a good story. And if you can't put the cart before the horse. Let's say your motive as a graphic novel writer or a comic writer, uh, let's say you want to build a universe that people can love, admire, go to for their entertainment purposes. That really can't be the sole motive, especially in light of your other stories being bad. You cannot build a universe without a good first story or set of stories that stand on their own. And that could be by way of a three-part a three-book series. A story that has a three-book arc. That's fine. But when I say a story, I mean a story that is on its own, separate to any of the other world building, any other lore, you know, stands on its own. I think why we will go back to Tolkien is The Lord of the Rings is a standalone piece of fiction, and The Hobbit is a standalone piece of fiction that we can turn to. Don't bother with what they're doing with Rings of Power, please. But going back to the actual text, it's like, yeah, like I've so many people don't like Silmarillion. I've talked to so many people who say I don't like Silmarillion. Like that's fine. You don't have to. You can like Lord of the Rings and not like the Silmarillion. Fine. But what the two work to go together hand in hand is Silmarillion is a beautiful setup to something like the Lord of the Rings. Where with Lord of the Rings, it's the third age is looking back on history, looking back on a very high art, society, and mythology. Like people go like the hobbits are traversing over all the terrain with Aragorn or Strider at the time, and they understand there was a past here. As it's so beautifully done. Um, it works fine. It works fine. Samuel says, or sorry, Simuli says the only big science fiction authors I have experienced are Bradbury, Heinlein, and Philip K. Dick. With Bradbury and Philip K. Dick, I've read mostly their short fiction. Dick certainly has the more blunt style. I've only read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I need to read more Philip K. Dick. I also need to read more H.G. Wells. I need to read a lot. I want to read more of the sci-fi classics. I'm really trying to read contemporary stuff, but I keep reading samples, and I'm like, actually, that's the stream I wanted to talk about. Actually, is the evolution of science fiction because it was more or less a specific thing, like back in the 40s. Well, really back in the early 20th century into the 70s, and then it's changed a lot. Speaking of science fiction, Edega Outlaw is here. Good to see you. If you guys want to check out his sci-fi and dark fantasy, he has that as that is his pen name, I think, right? I keep forgetting Edega. Is that your pen name for your books on Amazon? Just let us know. But good to see you. Great to have you. Marvelous says a good sequel is The Lost World. It doesn't differ. I think you're saying differ. Completely different look on the disaster of Jurassic Park. That's how I remember it. Anyway, I did not know. Yeah, that's a Michael Crichton Jurassic Park fiction. I never read the fiction. Or unless you're talking about the films. Are you talking about the films? Final Fantasy says sequels is very tricky to do. A great sequel I will go back to is Kingdom Hearts, the video game. Yeah, some of the world building is confusing between terms and names of beings, but, it's a good sequel. In many ways, I enjoy it more than the original game. I know there's a little bit of confusion with the world, building, but it's still good. It's I've never played it, I've only watched Professor Geek play it, but it's good. It holds up. It is 7:03. I knew this was gonna be a long stream. Studio Super, thank you again so much for your 9.99. I appreciate that. This really helps. Keeps the channel going. Even though the channel would go anyway, but, yeah, it's great talking about sci-fi, and I do appreciate you, with your 9.99. When it comes to world building, make sure you only tell the stuff essential to the story, yes, and not fill it with fluff, no. Don't make readers go, "Interesting, but why do I need to know this?" That was a lot of, this book. There were a lot of things where I'm like, was that really necessary to put in? And again, this in not a good way either. It's not a good anthology. This should have been an anthology. I feel like he would have been better at that. Some of these events in the narrative are like, did they really have to go there? All for this? Again, the real problem was Asimov sets it up like, oh, there's danger, and it's not because there were so many moments. There were like four, like out of five instances, three that were supposed to be dangerous were not dangerous at all. Two, the last remaining two actually was legitimate danger, and that's not cool. Like, you don't put your characters in dangerous situations and then have them walk out unscathed or not shaken psychologically. It's just a nuisance. Absolute nuisance. Brian says Mega Man 2 was a good sequel. Spider-Man 2, Andrea says, Spider-Man 2 and Terminator 2 are good sequels. Well, that's good. Now, but these were made earlier, right? Weren't these made before the 2000s? I actually don't know when Terminator 2 was made. I got to cough 1 second. All right. Let's see. I don't have my headphones on, so hopefully I'm not blaring into the audio. Ham-fisted, says Ace. I wonder why pork smacked isn't a thing. I don't know. ABL, nice to see you. Good to see you there. Um, yes, Samuel Lee says Bradbury has a masterful handle. Oh, I read what is it called? Bradbury's Prof did a book study on it too. It wasn't the October Prof. What's the title I'm thinking of with all the family, like the analog to the Addams Family. I'll know it once you write it. But I read that too, a couple. Oh, wait a second. I think I've Halloween Tree as well. Isn't that a Bradbury tale? See, I'm gonna have to write Halloween Tree. I think is also Bradbury. Oh, it's book. Or like actual Halloween trees. Yeah, Bradbury there. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, he's perfect for October. Perfect. Yeah, I knew I read more tales of his. Not so much sci-fi. I need to read more of his science fiction. But he's great. He's wonderful. Oh yeah, well actually Samueli, that's like my favorite story. Um I it is going down as one of my favorite stories of all time. Something Wicked This Way comes for the reason you say. A wonderful handle on language. I remember finishing that book, and the only thing that made me mad was I wish I read I wish I wrote that book. That was the only thing that made me mad. I was like, "Dang, I wish I wrote that because it he he for most of that book and there were things that bothered me about that book, but not with any of his writing, like, I felt sad for people. I felt like, "No, I wish that didn't happen, no." But it was good. It was good. It was indeed something wicked that way came. Yeah. It's good stuff. It is one of my favorite stories. I will read it every 3 or 4 years. It's great. It's a wonderful, wonderful cautionary tale, but it also works as a redemptive tale. It's so good. And there were some creative choices at the end, like, I'm like, "Oh, that's a little bit." I don't wanna cheapen it because it's still such a good tale. There's a little bit of a Care Bear power at the end, but at the same time, you're working with a spiritual evil, and so you have to work with a spiritual good. And sometimes it's very simple. Sometimes it's love against hate, good against evil, but it's still done in a very good way. I gotta sneeze now, one sec. Oh, that would've been ugly if that was on camera. Alright, moving along down. Marvelous says, as far as the robot series, you say they ultimately it only exists to marginalize our natural concern about uncontrol about uncontrollable technology using pretty silly assumption. Yeah, I think that's why I like Bicentennial Man and Foundation Trilogy is that there's a human heart to those stories, and it should be left at that. Like, just leave it at that. If you wanna work with cautionary tales, that's fine too. Uh, Waterclap is a story where there are some political tendencies I would not agree with, but it's still a good story. So I definitely wanna, uphold an author for the good they did. So if there are short stories that Asimov I think are really good, I'm gonna recommend those. Or the trilogy, I'll recommend that. But anything subversive of those, I would not read. So if it comes to the point where the novels of the robot series, don't work so well with me, I'll let you guys know. I would go into that lore with the expectations of what I saw with things like the robots, short stories, and then Multivac. Multivac was great. Multivac was great. I mean, even some stories, a really good short story is, oh gosh, what is it called? The Unanswered Question? Or is that the Charles Ives piece I'm thinking of? The Last Question. That's his short story. And, it does have a little bit of a mockery at the end of the story that is a real it could mock the Christian faith a little bit, but it not n I wasn't offended by it, like, it didn't offend me. It was such a good tale. It was such a good setup, dealing with entropy and human immortality, and, it was good. It's really good. Y Final Fantasy says, Jason Reitman said it best. Normally, when you make a film, you own it, and then you release it. It's not yours anymore because it's out there for everyone to see and later own in their home. I mean, it's very health. That's a very healthy perspective as an author. Yep, that is true. Let me put this up. Studio Super. You say you do have an X account, and I also posted the motion comic from my PSA comic on the YouTube channel. So there's that. Okay, there's that as well. Okay, good. Yeah, there's stuff I like if it is art that's not safe for work, I can't recommend it by my own conscience. But your avatar for here looks totally fine. And if you have a story based on that too, like let us know on that. And if you have a channel, if you have a YouTube channel, that's good too. I can't recommend just by my clear conscience anything that's not safe for work, but anything that's fine and good, I definitely will recommend. Thank you so much again. Let's see. Continuing on down. Oh, Han is okay. So Amy L says Han is pronounced with a long ah sound. Okay, so Han Dynasty. Cool. Cool. Yes, Marvelous does. Wait. Oh, so you have a frowny face. You say you like the Cimmerillion. Yeah, a lot of people don't, and that's their prerogative. They can like whatever they like and dismiss whatever they want. Big Al, welcome. Whoa, late. I fell asleep. Yeah, welcome. Well, glad to have you. When was that? That was 7:06. Oh yeah, you missed my whole rant, man. I had like a 50-minute long rant, maybe even longer. Oh. Oh, thank you, man. Thank you so much, Studio Super. That's just great. I appreciate the super chats. Um uh this is a new one. Yes, with world building thoughts on approaching it if let's see. Thoughts on approaching it as if there's something everyone knows, like you're spending a day in the life of this world so you don't get obsessed with every detail. Let's see. Yes. So what you're saying here is on world building, should you approach it like it as if the world is something everyone knows? And yes. Yes. That's how you write your world is as if you don't you cannot write it like a tourist unless you're completely new to that world. I explore that with some of my short fiction. I need to finish this short story before the end of the month. I've been trying to write a short story a month, and I'm failing miserably. But it's a man who is traveling to this planet he's been so excited to go to, and it's completely new to him. And then he actually there's a local who helps him out with certain things, and then he gets confused. There's a little conflict. He's like, "Wait, why is this the case? I'm uncomfortable by this because he wasn't expecting what he was expecting." And then he's trying to see it through the eyes of the local, but because the local can help him out with different things involving this planet, then it's perfect, like because he's new to the planet. So I could approach, and he's the protagonist of the short story. I could approach it through, and actually, I'm using first person perspective actually. So I'm only in this person's perspective, and so he's excited and odd, and then uncomfortable, and like, oh no, what is all this? So yes, it now if you're writing from a perspective of a protagonist inside the world, like with Harry Potter, if you wrote that world, let's see, what would be a good example? The Weasleys. If you wrote from the perspective of a family member of the Weasleys, well, they're used to magic. They wouldn't show you magic. J.K. Rowling wouldn't show you magic through their perspectives like you are showing it through Harry's perspective because Harry's completely new. He is a fish out of water to the situation in the first book. So everything is fantastical. Like you are going into the world. It's almost like a portal story. Like or something like a perfect example is Lucy Pevensey for Chronicles of Narnia. Everything is completely unusual to her. In a strange, well, I want to say that carefully because she does have the innocence of a child. Like, oh, this is great, guys, come see what I saw. And then the older siblings are dubious by it, and she gets picked on by Edmund. But anyway, yeah, like you're spending a life in the world. Don't be obsessed with writing every detail. Like the details will come with the story. So yeah, yeah, perfect point. Thank you, Studio Super. That is amazing. And I think with your because you're doing a graphic novel, right? Or you're doing a comic strip of some kind. Um, you can show that. That's the beautiful thing about the visuals is you can show that. But with text, you gotta be careful. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna move along down on 1 second. Sorry, guys. I sinuses, so I might cough and sneeze intermittently. But that's oh my gosh, it's almost 2 hours. I knew this was gonna be a long stream. I went in thinking I'm gonna rant a long time. So there we go. Maybe we should cut it before 2 hours. Wow, 2 hours. All right. Um, I will go through the comments a little faster. Um, let's see. You guys are talking amongst yourselves. Final Fantasy says, "I'm not saying I think Silmarillion is bad, but there are heaps of lore that goes on in there, and I get that at this point in the story because it's taking place in the first age of Middle Earth." I mean, one thing I suggest, and I don't say this flippantly or sacrilegiously, read the Silmarillion like it's the Bible version for Middle Earth or Middle Earth's Bible. It's pretty much the Bible for Middle Earth. It's the start of it's the creation story leading all the way to the cataclysmic events like the fall of Numenor, the final war against Morgoth, the fall of Morgoth, the rise of Sauron. I mean, it really works like a Bible of sorts. Um, it's awesome. I mean, I like it. I like it. It doesn't read like the Lord of the Rings. It wasn't meant to. It's its own thing, and it's perfect. What's well, is it perfect? I don't know. I just like it a lot. So anyway, yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna say with that. But so just as a recap before I close, we'll be closing in about 10 or so minutes. We gotta stop at the 2 mark, but don't leave just yet. So as just my final thoughts for Asimov, read his short fiction and read the Foundation trilogy. I will still go back to the Foundation trilogy. I don't care what's happened in the prequels. I don't care what's happened in the sequels. This is still a good piece of science fiction literature, just on its own. And I thank the stars. No, I thank the Lord. No, it's not something I thank the Lord for, but but I got this Christmas present having only read the Foundation trilogy. Now there might be a big old book with all 7 books. Don't need it. If there's a beautiful book with all 7 stories, don't need it. This is fine on its own. So I come to you with this as a reader and as a writer of science fiction. Foundation trilogy is on its own very nice. It's a good piece of sci-fi literature. You don't need to bother with the sequels. You don't need to bother with the prequels. Just this, the trilogy. That's it. That's it. Give it a 4 point. I give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars as a piece of literature. And it's if you like sci-fi or if you want to get into sci-fi, that's great. Don't bother with this. He didn't have to. That is the whole tragedy of it, is that this book didn't have to exist. Isn't that sad? It's not even bad fiction, it's fiction that didn't have to exist. So that's my conclusion there. Now going forward, I think I do want to talk a little bit more about science fiction next stream if you guys are interested. It really is. This will be a little bit more involving pop culture, but strictly in the sci-fi sense. Now, maybe it could be applied to things like, okay, things I need to consider about science fiction if I want to read it or if I want to write it. But I have in mind to talk about, hey, what changed about science fiction from the old to the new? Because it really did change ever since I would say, the commencement of the Star Wars and the space opera. There was a lot that did change for the better, for worse. Who's to say? But I do want to talk about more science fiction going forward. I probably will also talk about a little bit about Star Wars, the EU book Shatterpoint with Mace Windu. I'm about to finish that book, and it's a very uplifting story. There's a lot of good stuff about that book, so I might do a review of that as well next week. So maybe Star Wars, maybe science fiction next week. Still composing. I've been doing a lot of different things involving music. and it's really taking up all my time if I'm not teaching or if I'm not with prof and my family. Um, and it's good. The work I'm doing is good, but because of that, I just at this moment in this year, I don't have time for YouTube videos, unfortunately. Um, hopefully sometime soon, but I'm kind of just being lenient about that. It's just the really the only YouTube I'm doing right now is um live streams. So live streams will definitely continue, which is because it's something I enjoy. It's my favorite pastime. So I enjoy talking with you guys and all that. But um, I'm working in SuperCollider. I'm working on my compositions. Anything new in SuperCollider, I'm not going to probably post as a video. Maybe I will if it's good enough. But I will still post it on Pastebin. I'll still like announce new stuff I'm learning on Super cluttered there. Just as far as the YouTube format, just not right now because 'cause I've got a lot of musical projects in the queue that's actually not really anything to do with YouTube. It's for a totally different thing. Did you guys hear that? My stomach is telling me, "Hey, it's time for you to go on your date and have some pizza." So anyway, I will, leave it there. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and I will catch you later. Take care.